Chapter 13. Leo stared at the drunkard peanuts in Lucas' palm and thought to himself that he was really idle, accompanying the junior secretary on a drunken spree in the middle of the night. Although he thought so, he still sat in the chair, pushed Lucas' hand away with his fingertips and said, "I've said I don't want them." Lucas poured a few peanuts into his own mouth and said, "Oh right, you have a cleanliness fetish." The air was filled with the aroma of hops and the heavy night became warm. Leo reached out to loosen his collar, adjusted his sitting posture to make himself more comfortable, and allowed himself to show a lazy and leisurely state. The light pollution in the city at night was severe. Once his eyes adapted to the darkness, he could see clearly without turning on the light. This dim state was actually relaxing. The junior secretary beside him was munching on peanuts, which sounded like a squirrel gnawing on nuts, making Leo relax. He said, "You weren't crying because of work. Why should I let you off?" Lucas knew that Leo held grudges the most. While eating, he said, "I've said I didn't cry." He put down the peanuts, sniffed, and said, "Actually, I'm not that sad about the breakup." Who would be sad about a scumbag? I just feel that I've wasted my time and energy, and it's a bit upsetting. Lucas' voice had a nasal tone and became even softer in the quiet environment. I have a lot of suitors. If I had known he was such a person, I wouldn't have wasted my time. As Leo listened to Lucas rambling on, he suddenly said, "Stop pretending." He turned his head to look at Lucas and pierced through his disguise. "There's no way you're not sad about a breakup. Unless you didn't put in any effort. As long as you've given your heart, it's normal to be sad." Lucas looked up and stared directly at Leo. This guy is so annoying. Why does he have to expose the truth? Can't he let me make excuses for myself? I just don't want to admit it. When he agreed to be with Benjamin back then, he must have had a crush on him and had beautiful wishes, hoping to be together forever. Who would have thought that it would end like this in less than 4 months? Just as Leo said, he had been sincere from beginning to end. His eyes couldn't help but well up with tears again. Lucas lowered his head to hide it and wiped his face. How embarrassing. He couldn't help but reach for the wine bottle beside him and took a sip straight from the mouth of the bottle. Only then did Leo notice that it was a bottle of grain liquor and it was almost empty. He didn't expect there to be high-proof liquor hidden among the beer cans. Mixing beer and liquor, no wonder he got drunk. Leo leaned forward and snatched the liquor bottle from Lucas' hand, scolding him, "Trying to kill yourself." Lucas looked at the president aggrievedly. Leo lectured him, "Making such a big deal over a breakup, you little kid. I didn't get depressed when I lost money on an investment back then." Lucas used his muddled head to think about the connection between a breakup and investment failure and said, "How can these be the same? Losing money is more serious than a breakup." Leo instilled his values in Lucas. Lucas nodded, "You're right. If I had money, I wouldn't have been cheated on." Leo couldn't help but tap him on the forehead. "Still thinking about that scumbag? Do you still want him to come back to you?" Lucas shouted, "I'm not thinking about him. I'm just not willing." He tugged at the corner of his lips, looking extremely aggrieved. Why did I have to meet such a scumbag? Everyone thinks I've been in many relationships, but I haven't. I was very serious and careful, but this still happened to me." The more Lucas talked, the sadder he got, and he wanted to grab the wine from Leo's hand. Leo put the bottle of liquor out of his reach, pursed his lips, and said, "Just think of it as gaining experience. You'll make a profit after a few losses." Oh. Lucas vaguely felt that Leo's theory was off, but he couldn't tell what was wrong. He stupidly asked, "Then how many times do I have to lose?" Leo couldn't say either. He had never comforted anyone before and didn't know how to make Lucas stop being sad. He could only say, "Work hard and make money. Don't think about other things." Lucas obediently nodded. Lucas' face was flushed from the alcohol, his eyes were misty. Sitting on the ground, he was very well behaved when listening to Leo seriously. Leo couldn't stand their stupid conversation. He reached out and picked up a can of beer from the ground, pulled the tab, brought it to his lips, and took a small sip. Lucas was a little surprised. He didn't expect Leo to take the initiative to drink. Leo was still wearing his overcoat, but the shirt inside was unbuttoned, faintly revealing his collarbone. He casually held the beer can with his fingers, opened his eyes, and took a sip from time to time. His Adam's apple rolled with the rhythm of swallowing. Lucas was seeing the president in such a state for the first time and found it quite novel. Leo glanced at him sideways and said, "What are you looking at?" Lucas laughed foolishly and said, "Mr. Leo, you are so handsome." "Stop flattering me," Leo said. "You must be scolding me in your heart." Even if Lucas was drunk, he couldn't admit it. He firmly said, "Absolutely not. Now your image in my heart." He stretched out his arms and made a big circle, saying, "Is this big?" Leo let out a snort of laughter. Lucas continued, "Really, it's so nice of you to accompany me today. You are really a good person. Woo-woo. He was still acting drunk. There was no hope for him. Holding the beer can in one hand, Leo pulled his collar down a bit further with the other and said, I didn't come here specifically to accompany you. As if not hearing Leo's words, Lucas groped for a can of beer from the side, fumbled to open the ring, pull, and said, drinking with two people is much more fun than drinking alone. Just now, when he was alone, it was dim and silent all around. He stared at the neon lights outside the window and drank alone, sip by sip. That bitter feeling couldn't be told to anyone. It was like a wet sponge covering his nose and mouth, suffocating and sad. But after Leo came, his mood gradually improved. The stone pressing on his heart was quietly removed, and he didn't feel so bad. Lucas now felt like walking on clouds. He raised the beer can towards Leo and said, cheers. Seeing Lucas squinting his eyes and swaying unsteadily, Leo knew that the young secretary was probably about to collapse. He brought the beer in his hand closer and said, all right, cheers. The two cans clinked together, making a clear sound. Hee, Lucas laughed while drinking. Because there were still tears on his face, this smile looked a bit ugly. Leo stared at him and said, stop drinking. Lucas finished the can of beer in one gulp and said, I won't drink anymore. He stopped drinking but began to feel sleepy. Lucas yawned, crossed his legs, and rested his head on his knees. Hey, I won't take care of you if you fall asleep here. Leo threatened. Okay. Lucas mumbled in agreement, and the next moment his head drooped. The squirrel beside him let out soft breathing sounds and instantly fell into a sweet sleep, not caring at all that there was a big boss beside him. Leo tossed aside the empty beer can and was just about to get up and ignore him. Unexpectedly, Lucas suddenly fell towards him and his head bumped into Leo's thigh. Lucas was woken up by the alarm on his phone. He was startled by the ringing and wanted to get up and go to work, but his head hurt as if it was about to split. He opened his eyes, was confused for a moment, thought about why he was in such a state, and then remembered that he had drunk alcohol last night. Not only did he drink, but he also drank with Leo. Lucas bounced up from the bed. His alcohol tolerance was actually okay. Last night, he just mixed two kinds of alcohol and was in a bad mood, so he got drunk a bit quickly. So he probably remembered everything that happened last night. Lucas suddenly felt a twinge of guilt. Then he found that he wasn't at home, which made him even more embarrassed. This was Leo's lounge, which was connected to the president's office. He had actually slept there all night. Lucas struggled to get out of the bed. He was still wearing yesterday's clothes, which were all wrinkled after being tossed around all night. Just then, Leo pushed the door open and came in. Seeing Lucas in this state, he showed a look of disgust and said, clean yourself up. After saying that, before Lucas could react, he slammed the door shut. This lounge of Leo's is not used very often, but as a secretary, Lucas is familiar with its layout. After washing up, he took a T-shirt with the company logo from the wardrobe and ironed his coat with a garment steamer. He couldn't wash the clothes, so he had to make do like this. After he finished tidying up, he opened the door and walked out, directly entering Leo's office. He slowly walked up to Leo's desk, lowered his head, and whispered, Mr. Leo. Leo was still in a suit and tie with a straight face as usual. Lucas didn't know where Leo had rested last night or how he had changed his clothes. Anyway, Leo was as cold and noble as usual. There was no sign that he had been drinking, which was completely different from himself. Leo glanced at Lucas, frowned tightly, and forced himself to endure, saying, you still reek of alcohol. Lucas lowered his head more and more, wishing he could bury himself underground, and said, sorry, Mr. Leo. Just thinking about what he had said and done in front of Leo yesterday made him cringe with embarrassment. He originally didn't want to tell anyone about his breakup, but now Leo knew everything. He had even bared his heart in front of Leo, telling him that he hadn't been in many relationships and he had even slept in the president's lounge. Let him just die. Leo stared at the top of Lucas's head and said, raise your head. Lucas immediately raised his head, showing a flushed face, but didn't dare to look the president in the eye. His eyes darted around everywhere. Leo asked, don't you have anything else to say? Lucas cleared his throat and said, and thank you, Mr. Leo. Leo showed an expression of that's more like it, pointed to the side, and said, dispose of that. Lucas turned his head and only then saw a paper bag placed on the ground in front of the desk. As Lucas went to get the bag, he asked, Mr. Leo, what is this and how should I dispose of it? Leo's look of disgust on his face grew stronger and he said, these are my clothes. Go and throw them away. Lucas was stunned. Leo coldly told him because the saliva of a certain drunkard got on them. Chapter 14. Now, Lucas was even more embarrassed. He pinched the paper bag and said awkwardly, I'll compensate you, Mr. Leo. Given Leo's degree of cleanliness, he wouldn't wear them even after they were washed. They could only be thrown away. Leo wasn't being polite to him. Instead, he sneered and asked, "Can you afford to compensate?" Lucas paused. Leo was too lazy to dwell on such a matter, take it out and throw it away. He sat there with his brows furrowed all the time. It seemed that the smell of alcohol still lingered at the tip of his nose, making him feel uncomfortable all over, as if being pricked by needles as fine as cow hair. Lucas was drunk yesterday and fell on him. He used Leo's thigh as a pillow. Leo still remembered that feeling now and thought there was still the smell of alcohol on his pants. Finally, Leo couldn't stand it anymore. He stood up and said to Lucas, "Get someone to thoroughly clean this place. Also, change all the things on your desk and in the lounge." As he spoke, he walked outside and warned Lucas, "Make sure it's clean. If I come back and still smell alcohol, you'll have to pay for the clothes." Lucas understood, President. Leo strode away. Lucas stood in the president's office, looking at the wide, open door. After a while, he twitched the corners of his lips. Originally, he was very grateful to the president for taking him in for one night, but what did it mean to show a stinky face and dislike him early in the morning? Lucas sniffed and thought to himself that he had spent half a day tidying up inside before coming out. How could there still be the stench of alcohol? It was simply nitpicking. He picked up the paper bag on the ground, walked outside, and called the cleaner to arrange everything. Then he stared at the clothes in the paper bag. Each piece of Leo's clothes cost at least 5 digits. The whole set together was indeed quite expensive. It was a pity to just throw them away. It was just his saliva. Wasn't it okay to just wash it clean? When Leo went downstairs, he happened to meet Henry, who was coming to work. He called Henry to stop. "I need to talk to you." Henry followed up and said, "You're so early today." Leo tugged at his tie and said with a straight face, "Thanks to someone." Henry was puzzled. "What do you mean?" The two of them descended in the elevator all the way. Leo didn't answer but just asked, "You said before that Lucas's boyfriend has a cooperation with our R&D department?" Henry didn't understand why Leo was asking this early in the morning. He said confusedly, "It seems so. His surname is Xie." Leo said, "Terminate the cooperation with him." Henry was surprised. "Why?" "It is said that the research projects applied by Professor Benjamin are of high quality. Moreover, he is Secretary Lucas' boyfriend after all." Leo corrected Henry. "Ex-boyfriend." Henry was stunned. Leo said, "There are so many associate professors. We don't need him." Henry seemed to understand something. Blinking his eyes, he said, "But the R&D department of the group has the final say in R&D. Our R&D department has no say. The cooperation project with S-City University is led by Director Chin. We just enjoy the results. It may take a lot of detours to kick Professor Benjamin out of the team." Leo pondered for a moment and said, "Forget it. You don't have to worry about this. I'll call Nolan directly." Henry didn't say more and quietly followed beside Leo, but his eyes couldn't hide his surprise. Mr. Leo actually called young Master Chin because of Lucas' ex-boyfriend. The brothers hardly talked to each other even during the spring festival. Moreover, the word ex in ex-boyfriend is thought-provoking. It seems that something must have happened between the president and Secretary Lucas. Leo glanced at Henry. "Your smile is so disgusting." Henry put away his smile and said, "No, I'm very serious." Leo knew what Henry was thinking and said, "It has nothing to do with Lucas. I can't tolerate any flaws. Just thinking about having such a person in the team made his misophobia act up. Kick him out as soon as possible. Out of sight, out of mind." Lucas spent a whole day cleaning Leo's office and lounge. He wore the company's cultural t-shirt and busied in and out with the cleaners, which made everyone confused. What new trick is this? The relationship between the president and Secretary Lucas is always so unpredictable and hard to understand. When Lucas got off work, he took Leo's clothes home. They were so expensive. It would be good to sell them at a discount. He carefully examined those clothes but didn't see any saliva stains at all. They were clean and tidy, with the perfume Leo usually used and a faint smell of beer. They smelled really good. Lucas put the stiff and soft overcoat in front of his nose and took a deep breath. Then he thought his action was a bit perverted. He put the clothes away again and planned to find an opportunity to take them out for cleaning. After dinner and a shower, he threw himself onto the bed and let out a long sigh of relief. It was really strange. He didn't feel sad at all now. It seemed that all his sadness and sorrow had evaporated with the alcohol from last night. All that was left was a feeling of refreshment. After getting over the embarrassing period, he slowly recalled what he had said to Leo, and surprisingly, he could remember almost all of it. Just thinking about their childish conversation made Lucas want to laugh. Mr. Leo must have never encountered such a situation. Thinking carefully, there was clearly a sense of helplessness in the words he said. Things like, losing money is more serious than a broken heart, and you'll make a profit after a few losses. How could anyone comfort others like that? But Lucas found it quite comforting. At least his mood had recovered, and he wouldn't think about those unnecessary things anymore. Just as Leo said, work hard and earn money well. Lucas lay in bed, turned his head, saw the Mr. Leo doll beside him, and greeted it. Thanks, President. Lucas had been dizzy after drinking too much. He didn't sleep well in the President's lounge either. Now that he was home, he just wanted to have a good sleep. As soon as he closed his eyes, he heard the message alert on his phone. He opened his eyes annoyedly, thinking it was work-related, resignedly got up, picked up his phone, and prepared to reply. Unexpectedly, it wasn't work, but a female college classmate. This female classmate was named Elizabeth. She was in the same class as him in college. They were in the same club at that time and were quite familiar with each other. They just didn't contact each other much after graduation, only sending each other greeting messages during festivals. He wondered what she suddenly sent a message for. Lucas stared at the message, "Are you there?" and felt a bit nervous. He was most afraid that an old classmate he hadn't seen for a long time would suddenly send these two words. It was either asking him for a favor or inviting him to their wedding and asking for a wedding gift. Lucas thought for a while and still replied, "Yes, what's up?" Seeing the reply, Elizabeth got excited all of a sudden and said incoherently, "There's something. I'm not sure if it's appropriate. I'll just ask casually." Lucas was left on tenterhooks by her and said, "Just tell me what it is directly." Elizabeth sent over a photo and asked, "Is this your boyfriend?" Lucas took a closer look and felt a pang in his heart. It was a photo of Benjamin and Thomas. The two were very intimately close to each other, smiling broadly. The sense of disgust that had just subsided welled up again. Lucas typed, "We've broken up. It has nothing to do with me." The other side didn't expect this answer. After a moment's hesitation, she continued, "I see. I saw the photo you posted on your WeChat moments before and remembered this guy." Only then did Lucas remember that when he first got together with Benjamin, he had posted an official announcement photo. But Benjamin said he didn't like to be high profile, so he deleted the photo. He didn't expect that this college classmate not only saw it but also recognized Benjamin's face. How gossipy she is. Lucas originally didn't want to pay attention, but then he thought that since she had come specifically to inquire, she must have meant to remind him. Whether it was out of nosiness or something else, he should at least be polite. So Lucas asked, "How do you have their photo? Do you know them?" Only then did Elizabeth start to tell the whole story. After graduation, Elizabeth worked in a cultural company specializing in undertaking art exhibitions and promoting artworks and had a lot of dealings with artists. Thomas, who had just graduated and returned to China with a major in design, actively integrated into the domestic circle with his works. After a while, the two got to know each other. Elizabeth even got into one of Thomas's small groups. There were about 20 people in the group, mostly Thomas's friends and other emerging designers. As an agent among them, she was both terrified and reluctant to leave. Thomas came from a good family and was very high profile in his career. He often participated in competitions and exhibitions and posted his works in the group. Elizabeth just needed to shower him with compliments every day and thus managed to gain a foothold in the group. But sometimes Thomas would also talk about things in his life. This time, he posted a photo of him and his boyfriend in the group. As usual, there was a wave of compliments, saying how well matched they were. But the more Elizabeth looked at that man, the more familiar he seemed. "It took me a long time to remember. Isn't this your boyfriend?" Elizabeth was more talkative than when she was a student and kept sending messages. "What a coincidence. After much thought, I felt it wasn't right, so I came to ask you." Elizabeth didn't tell Lucas that she had stayed up all night worrying, afraid that she was being too nosy. But there was still a bit of a sense of justice deep in her heart, which drove her to come to Lucas. Lucas didn't know how to respond. This world was really small. No wonder they said on the internet that you could be connected to anyone in the world through just 6 people. He could only repeatedly emphasize, "Anyway, we've already broken up." Elizabeth said, "It's a good thing you broke up. I remember you didn't date this guy for very long. And now he's hooked up with Thomas. He must not be a good person. Elizabeth comforted him. It's good that you broke up. Out with the old, in with the new. He didn't want to publicize the breakup at first, but how did it seem like the whole world knew? Lucas said, what they do has nothing to do with me. But Elizabeth misunderstood his meaning. She didn't know the backstory. Thinking about Lucas' good looks as the campus heartthrob, she assumed it was him who dumped that guy. And the fact that the dumped guy found a new partner so quickly made Lucas unhappy. So Elizabeth said, don't worry. Thomas has a complicated personality. The two of them definitely won't last long. When they break up, Thomas will definitely post about it in the group. I'll let you know then. He was really convinced by this old classmate. In chapter 15, after all, she meant well and came specifically to remind him. Lucas couldn't say anything harsh to Elizabeth. He could only keep repeating, I'm really not interested in them. Let them do whatever they want. Only then did Elizabeth sense something was off and said, well, it was my meddling. Lucas quickly said, anyway, thank you for caring about me. Elizabeth sent a friendly emoji and said, we're old classmates. Keep in touch in the future. Lucas chatted with her for a while more before ending the conversation. What a coincidence. Lucas sneered sarcastically. Just as he had finally let go of his grudges, news about the other woman popped up right in front of him. But he wouldn't waver. Since he'd decided to say goodbye to the past, he'd stick to it. Lucas lay back down, pulled the quilt over his head, and planned to have a good sleep. Maybe it was just Lucas' illusion, but he felt busier than before. Maybe he spent more time at the company, or maybe Leo knew he was single again and used him even more. Anyway, Lucas' recent life has been all about work. It's almost the end of the year, and there are a lot of things to do. Next week, Leo is going to City N. There are mainly two things. One is to attend a national energy conference, and the other is that a big shot in the automotive industry in City N is having a birthday, and Leo has to attend. The two events are scheduled very close together, so Leo plans to handle them together. In novels, it's as easy as drinking water for a CEO to travel on business frequently, but in reality, it's not that simple. The CEO appears relaxed and glamorous, while others have to work themselves to the bone. Even though Leo has a property in City N and Shirway has an office there are still many things to prepare. Moreover, since Leo will be giving a speech at the conference this time, someone needs to follow up on the conference affairs, someone needs to write the speech, someone needs to revise the PPT, and there are also a series of trivial matters such as hotels, clothing, and transportation. All these require manpower to arrange. Therefore, there are more than a dozen secretaries and assistants in the CEO's office. As the one guarding the door of Leo's office, Lucas doesn't often travel on business with him. Besides, he hasn't been a secretary for long and still needs to learn a lot of things. So, Leo won't take him along. This doesn't mean he has nothing to do. Henry threw a pile of materials in front of him with a bang. Lucas looked up and asked, "What are these?" Assistant Henry said, "Catalogs and contact information of clothing and jewelry brands, as well as restaurant reservation numbers, hotel catalogs, winery catalogs, and so on." Lucas paused for a moment and sincerely asked, "Why are you giving these to me?" He thought he only needed to handle the administrative affairs within the company. Henry shrugged and said, "As you know, Mr. Leo doesn't have a personal assistant. People in the position of CEO sometimes have an assistant who always stays by their side to handle some personal affairs. For example, buying things, waking them up in the morning, picking them up and dropping them off anyway, being a little attendant on standby 24 hours a day. But Leo doesn't have a personal assistant because he has a cleanliness fetish and can't stand someone invading his life. It is said that there isn't even a resident housekeeper in his mansion. The housekeeping staff comes to do the cleaning at a fixed time every day, and there is no one in the huge mansion at other times. Leo doesn't like having someone follow him closely, so some affairs are shared among the staff in the CEO's office. These things used to be handled by Ivy. Since she was transferred, you're new here and might not be familiar with them, so I and others have been handling them temporarily for the past few months. But Mr. Leo is very dissatisfied," Henry said with a sigh. "The CEO's special assistant is already very busy, and it really doesn't make sense to take care of such trivial matters. Ivy was meticulous and good at dealing with people, arranging everything properly and thoughtfully, so she was specially transferred to the HR department." "Please," Henry said. "Since Ivy used to handle this, There's no reason for Lucas not to take it over. He let out a silent wail in his heart but showed nothing on his face. He smiled and said, "Okay, Assistant Henry. I'll get familiar with it as soon as possible." Henry felt much more relaxed after passing on some of the work and left Lucas's desk. Lucas resignedly flipped through those materials and felt dizzy. Not to mention anything else, just recognizing those high-end designer brands was difficult. There were French and Italian names all the time. Lucas prayed in his heart that his motherland would become stronger and Chinese would become the international common language in the future, so that all these brands would have Chinese names. Despite his complaints, Lucas could only find time to get familiar with these businesses. He didn't know until he got familiar with it. The price of the suit Lucas took back last time was astonishing. Lucas originally wanted to send it to the neighborhood dry cleaner for a simple wash. He immediately dispelled this idea and solemnly sent it to the laundry of a 5-star hotel. After it was well taken care of, he carefully picked it up. He decided to keep the suit like a precious heirloom. After all, its price could be considered as a family heirloom for his family. This time when Leo goes to City N, he has to attend a birthday party of a big shot. Naturally, gifts need to be prepared. Fortunately, since the status of this big shot is relatively high, Leo arranges the gifts personally and doesn't let his subordinates get involved. Lucas breathes a sigh of relief. But there are still a series of issues such as clothing and vehicles that need to be arranged in advance. However, the actual operation is better than expected because the president has a dedicated image consultant. Lucas lay on the table, trying hard to remember the brands and communication points involved in Leo's trip this time. When he was feeling dizzy, another assistant in the office came over to remind him. "Secretary Lucas, remember to inform the women's clothing brands in advance." Lucas looked up and asked in confusion, "Women's clothing?" The assistant smiled helplessly and said, "Mr. Leo will definitely bring a female companion to the banquet. Sometimes in the past, he would let Supervisor Shaw stand in. But the host of this banquet has a high status and Mr. Leo hasn't decided who to take yet." Lucas let out another silent wail in his heart. Why is it so troublesome? Can he stand in? It would be more convenient for him to go. Even though he thought so, he couldn't wear a skirt. Lucas had to contact the clothing and jewelry brands. If needed, the goods could be directly transferred at that time. After a busy period, Lucas stole a moment of respite and stared blankly at the green plants in the corner. He was so busy arranging everything properly, but he couldn't go to City N with Leo. In the end, he still had to hand over the work to the accompanying assistant. He could only guard the door of the president's office and make daily visitor records. "What are you daydreaming about?" A cold voice sounded in his ear. Lucas was startled and quickly stood up to say to Leo, who suddenly appeared, "Mr. Leo." Leo stood in front of Lucas and looked down at him slightly. This time, Lucas didn't care about the president's condescending and contemptuous look from top to bottom. Instead, he began to pay attention to Leo's clothes. He could already tell the brand and approximate price of the clothes. The damned capitalist. Seeing the little secretary staring blankly at his collar, Leo squinted his eyes and asked unhappily, "Are you stupid?" Lucas blinked, came to his senses, and said, "No." "Does Mr. Leo have any instructions?" Leo sized him up and down and said, "You'll go with me to City N this time." Lucas was stunned. Leo asked, "Don't you want to go?" Lucas quickly replied, "Yes, of course I do." He didn't want to be left alone in the empty office. He wanted to go on a spree to City N with the capitalist. Leo showed his familiar look of disgust and said, "Can you be more steady?" Lucas put on a professional smile. Leo couldn't help but twitch the corners of his lips and criticized, "It's not a primary school spring outing. I'm taking you there to work." Lucas maintained the perfect arc of his lips and said, "I understand, Mr. Leo. I'll do my best." Leo walked inside. Finally, he turned back and said, "By the way, change your clothes. Otherwise, people in City N might think our Shearway can't afford to pay the salaries." Lucas lowered his head and sized up his own clothes. "What's wrong? Isn't it clean and tidy?" Soon it was time to go to City N. Since this energy conference was very important, Leo took several assistants. All the assistants and bodyguards took the cars behind. As usual, there was no one in Leo's car. Lucas didn't think it was like an outing. Instead, he thought it was like an emperor's journey to the south of the Yangtze River. Seeing him like this, Henry said with a bitter smile, "You'll understand after coming a few more times. Even a business trip to Mars is not as good as sleeping in bed." At the airport, Leo directly went through the VIP channel to the first-class cabin. Except for Henry, who accompanied him, the others took the economy class. Lucas watched as Leo and Henry walked one step further. He thought to himself that he had never been in first class and wondered what it was like inside. In his opinion, Mr. Leo wasn't ostentatious enough. In other novels, domineering CEOs all flew on private jets. The two men in front stopped after walking a few steps. Leo said something to Henry and Henry laughed in a strange way. After a while, Henry walked back the same way and said to Lucas, "Secretary Lucas, let's switch." Lucas didn't understand. "Switch?" Henry smiled and made it clear. "You accompany Mr. Leo and I'll go to economy class." Lucas was a little surprised but still agreed. After handling the check in procedures, Lucas carried the briefcase that Henry had given him and caught up with Leo. "Mr. Leo. Leo nodded lazily and took the lead in walking. Lucas carried the things and followed closely behind him. He accompanied Leo to rest in the VIP room all the way. He ordered food for Leo. When Leo wanted to read documents while waiting, he fetched them. He always paid attention to the boarding information. When boarding, he walked in front of Leo, communicated with the flight attendants, and arranged for Leo to take his seat. They were on a wide-body airliner. Only domestic routes between big cities like City S and City N had such planes. It was divided into first class and business class. Naturally, Leo was in first class. Even though Lucas had switched positions with Henry, he was still in business class. Before going back to his own seat, Lucas put the computer beside Leo's hand and patiently explained Leo's coffee preferences to the flight attendant. After everything was arranged, he bent slightly and said to Leo, "Mr. Leo, do you have any other instructions?" Leo stared at him. Lucas maintained an appropriate distance and softly repeated, "Mr. Leo, do you want something else?" Leo raised his hand and his slender fingers beckoned Lucas. Seeing this, Lucas moved closer. The delicate young man drooped his bright eyes and bent over respectfully, yet he didn't seem humble. He was proper and polite, just like the most considerate and capable secretary. Originally, it was thought that someone like him would be like a primary school student on an outing, looking around and making jokes. But this person kept his eyes straight ahead from beginning to end, only focusing on his needs, responding appropriately, being natural and graceful, and doing everything flawlessly. Leo looked at Lucas' long eyelashes, reached out and flicked his forehead, then slumped into the seat and mumbled, "Boring." Lucas didn't complain even when his forehead was flicked. He straightened up and pretended not to hear, asking, "What did you say just now, Mr. Leo?" Leo closed his eyes and waved his hand to signal him to leave. Only then did Lucas say, "Then I'll go to my seat, Mr. Leo. Have a good rest." Lucas turned around and left. When his back was turned to Leo, a victorious smile appeared on his lips. Come on, of course he knew what Leo meant by suddenly asking him to swap with assistant Henry. It was just to find fault with him. He wouldn't give Leo this chance. Before the departure, he went to see Ivy and asked in great detail about all of Leo's preferences and habits when traveling. Lucas walked to his seat and sat down, snorting in his heart. They would stay in City N for some time, and it was still uncertain what would happen during this period. He made up his mind to leave Leo speechless. Take the most meticulous path and leave no way out for the fussy president. Chapter 16. The 2-hour flight was over in a flash. When they landed, someone came to pick them up. Leo got in the car and went straight to the next business activity. This time, instead of being alone in the car, he asked Lucas to sit in the front passenger seat to assist him. Leo had a cleanliness fetish, which was well known in the company. Usually, he didn't like others to ride with him. Even bodyguards were not allowed in his car. He only took a driver with him each time. But this time he let Lucas sit in the front passenger seat. It was really a rare thing. The other assistants were stunned when they saw the scene. One of them said to Henry, "Your position is in danger, Assistant Henry." Henry smiled and said, "It's fine. I'm tired of being an assistant anyway." Everyone knew that Henry had been in the position of special assistant for 8 years. 8 years ago, he even assisted Alexander. Seeing that Henry was unmoved, those people then turned to Lucas and said, "Secretary Lucas is so amazing. He has only been transferred to Mr. Leo's side for 3 months, and he has already won Mr. Leo's favor." Someone said meaningfully, "After all, he is good looking." Henry coughed and asked, "Do you know what about Secretary Lucas pleases Mr. Leo the most?" The few people looked at each other and shook their heads. Henry said, Secretary Lucas has never had any ulterior motives. The faces of those people all changed in unison. Henry patted their shoulders with a smile and said, when you speak ill of Secretary Lucas, you are actually disparaging Mr. Leo's judgment. I'm sure you don't want your boss to be muddle-headed, do you? Since the words had been spoken to this extent, no one dared to say anything bad about Lucas anymore. Lucas didn't know that he was being talked about. He was dealing with Leo's misophobia. Even though Leo let him get in the car, he was still very difficult to serve. Apparently, Leo was very uncomfortable with having an extra person in the car. He would ask Lucas if he had sprayed any perfume on his body one moment and ask him to put down the partition the next. Lucas knew that most misophobia was a psychological effect. He patiently cooperated with Leo and at the same time couldn't help muttering in his heart that since Leo disliked him, why did he let him get in the car? Fortunately, Leo was normal at work. Lucas followed Leo around busily all afternoon without any rest in the middle, and there was also a dinner arranged by the conference organizing group in the evening. This meeting was the first major discussion after the change in the raw material import and export policy. Those attending the meeting included not only enterprise representatives but also ministry officials and leaders of scientific research institutes. Although the atmosphere of the whole dinner was lively, everyone behaved elegantly and they toasted each other politely. This was the first time Lucas had followed Leo to such a dinner. Well, it was a bit different from what he had imagined. Henry saw through what he was thinking and leaned over to whisper to him, this kind of dinner is okay. It's a civilized banquet. There are restrictions on the specifications of the dishes and wine, and they won't force you to drink until you're dead. If there are all businessmen at the table, especially those old-fashioned bosses in the real estate industry, then it's over. You'd better take liver-protecting pills in advance. Of course, we can't let the bosses get drunk. So it can only be their assistants and secretaries who come out to take the drinks for them. Lucas nodded to show that he understood. Leo at the dinner table was quite different. He wouldn't refuse others who came to get close to him. He smiled faintly, looking elegant, handsome, and having a bit of the air of a scholarly businessman. Lucas stared at Leo parrying with others and thought to himself that he was communicating so well with others. There was no sign of misophobia at this time. Sure enough, the misophobia was just to torture their subordinates. Carter also came to this meeting. Last time when he went to Shearway, he was so irritated by Leo that he slammed the door and left. But this time, he acted as if nothing had happened and tried to get on familiar terms with Leo, introducing Leo to others as his grand-nephew. Obviously, Leo didn't want to recognize him as an uncle and was very cold in his attitude. After the dinner, everyone had a cup of tea together and talked about current affairs. Time passed quickly. By the time Lucas followed Leo back to the hotel, it was already late at night. They didn't stay at the hotel arranged by the conference group, but went to another luxury hotel in City N. Naturally, Leo stayed in the luxury suite on the top floor, while the other followers stayed in the business rooms below. This time, Leo left Lucas alone again. Leo doesn't even want a housekeeper at home, let alone someone to accompany him when staying in a hotel. It's unclear what he means by keeping Lucas here at this moment. The others cast complex looks at Lucas. Only Henry sympathetically patted him on the shoulder and told him to take care of himself. Leo asked Lucas to wait outside the suite and he went to take a shower first. While waiting, Lucas checked around to see if the hotel had arranged everything according to their requirements. The mineral water placed everywhere was the brand Leo liked. There were fresh juices and frozen ice cubes in the refrigerator. The ice cubes must be spherical. An air purifier was installed every 20 square meters and it couldn't make too much noise. The indoor temperature was strictly controlled at 25 degrees, neither 1 degree higher nor 1 degree lower. Lucas checked everything and it was all perfect. Leo shouldn't be able to find any faults. Lucas thought that the same trick wouldn't be used twice. Since Leo failed to set him up on the first-class flight, he would definitely change to another method. Half an hour later, Leo came out of the bathroom. He was wearing silk pajama pants on his legs, but only a bathrobe on his upper body. The belt was casually tied and the muscle lines on his chest were occasionally exposed when he walked. A show-off. Lucas evaluated in his heart. Of course, he wouldn't show his thoughts on his face. Since Leo came out, he had been standing upright, looking obedient. Leo sat down on the sofa in the outer hall and said, "Bring the computer." Lucas was stunned. Seeing that he was half a beat slower, Leo said impatiently, "What are you standing there for? Didn't you make preparations during all that time just now?" Lucas thought to himself, "I'm not a worm in your belly. How would I know what you want me to prepare?" But Lucas wasn't stupid. He not only brought the computer but also the materials needed for the next day's meeting. Leo glanced at him and said, "You're not completely hopeless." No matter what the president said, Lucas smiled and said, "I'll definitely make preparations in advance next time." Leo didn't say much. He directly turned on the computer and started to handle affairs. Whenever he needed other materials, he would call Lucas to find them for him. Lucas really didn't expect that Leo had kept him behind for work. He perked up and nimbly assisted Leo. At the same time, he thought to himself, "What were you doing earlier? Now you're scrambling at the last minute in the middle of the night." Leo lowered his head. While looking at the table on the computer and modifying the speech draft, his eyes fixed on the computer screen, but he said, "Otherwise, do you think the wine we drank today was for nothing?" Leo's sudden remark gave Lucas a start. He thought his inner thoughts had been heard, but later he understood what Leo meant. The dinner seemed calm on the surface, but actually it was full of information. The words of those people reflected the policy trends. So in tomorrow's meeting, some things could be said while some couldn't. What Leo was modifying and adjusting now was about this aspect. Lucas was completely convinced and honestly helped the president as an assistant. Once Leo started working, he switched to another state, with a calm look in his eyes and a serious expression on his face, focused and earnest. Every time Lucas saw him like this, his heart would beat a little faster. Lucas reluctantly admitted that his mood was like that of a young boy in his middle school days, eagerly following his big brother. In the eyes of the young boy, the big brother was always imposing and omnipotent. Leo came out directly from the bathroom. His hair was still wet, and the water droplets were hanging on the tips of his hair, swaying gently with his movements. As long as the movement was a bit bigger, those glistening water droplets would fall, roll into the open collar, and slide along the muscle texture over the smooth skin. Lucas had a thought and said, "Mr. Leo, dry your hair." Leo lifted his eyelids and looked at him. Lucas explained, "If you don't dry your wet hair in winter, you'll have a headache tomorrow." 25 degrees was suitable for him who was fully dressed, but Leo was only wearing a bathrobe, so it was a bit too cold. "You have a meeting tomorrow. It's better to keep warm," Lucas said and did it right away. He fetched the hairdryer and walked to Leo's side. Just as his fingers were about to touch the wet hair, Leo tilted his head to avoid it. Only then did Lucas remember Leo's cleanliness fetish. He said awkwardly, "Sorry, Mr. Leo." It made him seem like a sycophant. Seeing that Leo was reluctant, Lucas was about to sit back. Suddenly, Leo snatched the hair dryer from his hand, casually brushed his hair, and said, "I'll dry my hair. You do the work." Lucas didn't understand. "What are you standing there stupidly for? Come closer and look at the computer." Leo moved his body a bit to make room for Lucas. Lucas quickly leaned over. While Leo directed him to modify the document on the computer, he dried his own hair. "Here, delete this." "No, it's not this sentence." "Why are you so hasty? I haven't thought it through yet. Don't you understand this? How can you be so stupid?" Leo's criticism mixed with the buzzing sound of the hairdryer in Lucas's ears, making him extremely regretful. He shouldn't have bothered about Leo. Even if Leo got a headache, it had nothing to do with him. Later, after Leo dried his hair, he still didn't let Lucas off. He pressed Lucas in front of the computer and didn't stop until all the work was done. Lucas looked up exhaustedly and found that it was already 3 o'clock in the morning. He remembered that the meeting in the daytime required entry at 8:30. Immediately, he felt dizzy. Leo stood up from the sofa and didn't forget to mock Lucas, saying, "It's all because of you. Your low efficiency made us work until now." "Then don't let him do it." After Leo dried his hair, he had his own hands but still directed Lucas. Clearly, he enjoyed ordering him around. "Put these away and leave." Since the emperor had spoken, Lucas resigned himself to packing up the computer and documents, calculating in his mind how many hours he could sleep. After Lucas finished everything, he said to Leo, "Mr. Leo, I'll leave first. I'll come here earlier tomorrow morning." This morning. During his stay, Leo didn't allow any hotel staff to enter his room. All things, including breakfast, had to be handed to the secretary or assistant and then brought in. That meant Lucas had to get up even earlier to arrange Leo's breakfast and other preparations. Who would have thought that Leo glanced at him and said, "You don't need to come in the morning." Chapter 17. Lucas was stunned and didn't quite understand. "Why, Mr. Leo? Is there any other arrangement?" It was already very late, and Leo was a bit impatient. He frowned and rubbed his forehead. "Don't come if I tell you not to. There are other people. Don't talk too much." Lucas pursed his lips, exited the suite, and closed the door for Leo. He returned to his business room. His colleague in the same room had already fallen asleep. He washed up quietly and didn't lie in bed until nearly 4 o'clock. But he just couldn't fall asleep. He was wondering what he had done to upset Leo. Although he hadn't been with Leo for a long time, he had gradually got the hang of the president's temper. Leo seemed unpredictable, but in fact, he never made trouble without reason. There must be a reason when he got angry or spoke sarcastically, but sometimes the reason was rather tricky. Lucas just couldn't figure it out. He dozed off for a while in a daze, and then it was dawn. Leo didn't want him to go in the morning, and he didn't need to worry about lunch and other work. He could have slept for a few more hours, but Lucas still got up. When Leo set off for the venue, he followed the last car. Lucas didn't dare to show up in front of Leo. Besides the big shots attending the meeting, there were also many media at the venue. Lucas mingled in the media lounge area. Only when Leo was speaking did he go to the last row to listen. It has to be said that Leo is really an outstanding entrepreneur. When he stood on the stage and just smiled at the audience below, it triggered a round of applause from the whole audience. Leo is young and handsome. Even if he did nothing, just standing there was pleasing to the eye, not to mention that he is the helmsman of Shearway Technology. Leo spoke steadily on the stage, looking energetic and showing no sign of fatigue at all, even though he also went to bed after 3 o'clock. While deeply admiring Leo, Lucas listened to his speech attentively. Leo's speech draft was written by the president's office. Lucas had read the initial draft, which was completely different from today's content. The draft revised by the president himself is really different. From Leo's speech and the revision work last night, Lucas had a new understanding of the new policy and benefited a lot. But after Leo finished speaking, he didn't dare to stay any longer and went back to the media area again. On the way, Henry came out to go to the restroom. Seeing Lucas, he asked in surprise, "Secretary Lucas, why are you here?" Lucas said awkwardly, "Mr. Leo didn't want me to follow him this morning. I came here secretly for fear of being seen by him." Henry was stunned for a moment and then laughed. "What? Mr. Leo meant for you to have a good rest this morning." Lucas blinked his eyes in confusion. Henry told him, "You worked overtime very late last night, right? Since Mr. Leo said you don't have to come, you should just sleep well in the hotel." Lucas widened his eyes and asked, "Did I make Mr. Leo unhappy?" Henry patted Lucas on the shoulder with a smile and said, "No. You should have a good rest. After the meeting is over, Mr. Leo will definitely grab you to summarize the key points. It doesn't matter whether you attend the meeting or not." Lucas, "See, I understand. Can't he just make things clear?" It made him nervous all morning. The more Henry thought about it, the funnier it got. He said, "Secretary Lucas is really an honest man. After being by Mr. Leo's side for a while, you'll know how to slack off reasonably. In this kind of situation, Mr. Leo will turn a blind eye." Lucas thought to himself that Henry had a good relationship with Leo while he was still on probation. That's why he was always nervous and over-interpreted things. Now that he had figured it out, Lucas felt relieved. He simply walked directly to Leo's seat and poured tea for him. Leo raised his eyebrows when he saw Lucas appear and asked, "Why are you here?" Lucas calmly handed the teacup to Leo, lowered his eyes, and said, "I still want to listen to the meeting." Leo took a sip of tea and snorted, ungrateful and as stubborn as a mule. Lucas quietly twitched the corner of his lips. Although a bit sleepy, Lucas was in a relaxed mood. He found a seat beside and listened attentively to the speeches of the bigwigs. This scene fell into Benjamin's eyes. Benjamin wasn't originally qualified to attend a meeting of this level. But he had been dating Thomas recently and a lot of resources were tilted towards him. He just submitted a report and came along. He even got the qualification to speak. Of course, it wasn't for the main venue, but he was given a spot during the sub-venue discussions. At this time, Benjamin was sitting in the back and his eyes were always fixed on Lucas. Lucas was wearing a well-fitting suit with a slender figure. When facing Leo, he was smiling and very noticeable even in the venue full of elites. Many people cast glances in his direction, thinking he was a manager of some company. Benjamin clenched his fists. He knew that in private, Lucas liked to act coquettishly. If they were still together and met at the venue at this time, Lucas would definitely secretly come to him, stuff him with snacks, and say with a sweet smile, "Are you tired? Don't you feel better when you see me?" Benjamin's eyes flickered. When he thought about being kicked out of the cooperation team by Shearway some time ago, another kind of emotion welled up in his heart. Jealousy and anger intertwined, making him grit his teeth. During the lunch break, Lucas didn't stay by Leo's side to serve him. Instead, he ate the conference meal by himself and strolled around to digest. He thought that since Leo gave him a break, he could find a place to catch up on sleep. As he walked around a corner, he was suddenly grabbed and pulled behind the wall. Lucas looked up in surprise and saw Benjamin's face. Benjamin looked a bit thinner. Lucas thought it was strange. How could he have thought this person was handsome before? Now he only saw a sly and shifty look. Lucas immediately composed himself, frowned, and said impatiently, "What do you want?" Benjamin sneered and said, "You ask me what I want? I should ask you what you've done to me. You know it very well." Lucas was confused. "What have I done to you? Are you trying to frame me?" He said mockingly, "Professor Sia has now become related to the principal and has a lot of power." Benjamin said, "So you do know." As he spoke, his tone actually softened. "It's not what you think. I'm not after Thomas's family background either." Lucas looked at Benjamin as if he were an alien. This cheating scumbag still wanted to present himself as a noble and upright person now. Did he think Lucas was a fool, or was he just stupid himself? Lucas felt nauseated and disgusted. He thought he was really blind back then. Now he was even more impatient and said, "We have nothing to do with each other. I'm leaving." Benjamin stopped him and said, "You can vent your anger in front of me. I won't care about it. But it's too much to play dirty behind my back." Lucas didn't understand. "What are you talking about?" Benjamin asked him, "Did you spread rumors? That's why Shearway's R&D department doesn't want to cooperate with me anymore." Lucas was stunned. It was the first time he heard about this. He said coldly, "Who do you think you are? Do you think I'd remember you? I've long forgotten about you. I'm afraid my mouth will rot if I even mention your name in the company." Listening to Lucas' harsh words, Benjamin didn't feel angry. Instead, he felt a bit dazed. Lucas had always been gentle in front of him, but now he was so feisty, like a hot pepper. It was actually quite charming. Now that he thought about it, Lucas was just a secretary and didn't have the power to decide matters in the R&D department. He wouldn't even whisper in the president's ear about such things. Maybe it really had nothing to do with Lucas. Benjamin said, "Forget it. Although Shearway's project has sufficient funds, it's okay if it's gone. It just means making less money. We can just consider the preliminary preparations as a waste." Lucas didn't want to listen to his nonsense at all. He rolled his eyes and turned to leave. Benjamin forcefully grabbed his arm. Lucas frowned and said sternly, "Let go." Benjamin didn't let go and asked some meaningless questions. "How many days will you stay in City N?" Lucas tugged at his arm again and warned in a deep voice, "I told you to let go." Is this scumbag out of his mind? How dare he pester him like this? Anger welled up in Lucas. Just as he was about to use force, he heard a cold voice say, "Why did you come here?" Lucas and Benjamin both turned their heads and saw Leo standing on the other side of the wall in his overcoat, looking at them with a solemn expression. Seeing someone coming, Benjamin loosened his grip a little. Lucas immediately broke free and ran a few steps behind Leo. Leo didn't even look at Benjamin. He only said to Lucas, "Didn't I tell you to follow me?" Even if Lucas was stupid, he knew what to say. He made up an excuse, "I came out to get the materials you'll need this afternoon. On the way, I was pestered by a hooligan, which delayed me." There were no materials in Lucas' hands at all. Anyway, he was just telling lies with his eyes open. But Leo followed his words and gave Benjamin a cold look, his eyes as cold as if looking at a dead man. He said, "The security of the conference organizing group is too poor. How could they let such a person in?" For some reason, Benjamin was a little afraid of Mr. Leo. Every time he saw him, Mr. Leo always had a bad look on his face. Benjamin didn't have time to explain. He just said, "I'm Chodong's friend. There's a misunderstanding between us." After saying this, he left in a hurry and didn't want to stay for a moment longer, as if staying a few more seconds would make Leo's gaze freeze him into an ice cube. Lucas let out a sigh of relief and said to Leo, "Thank you, Mr. Leo." He nervously looked at Leo and explained, "Just now that guy." Anyway, Leo had met Benjamin and knew that he had broken up with Benjamin. So he just said directly, "I don't know why he's pestering me. I'll be more careful in the future." Don't let Benjamin sully Leo's eyes. Leo didn't respond to Lucas' words. Instead, he said, "Take off your clothes." Lucas was taken aback. Leo said impatiently, hurry up. Only then did Lucas slowly take off his coat. Leo snatched the coat from Lucas' hand, picked it up by a corner of the hem with his slender fingers, folded it up, and then quickly stuffed it into the trash can beside him. Chapter 18. Lucas stared blankly at Leo's actions and didn't react for a moment. After throwing away the coat, Leo felt a bit more comfortable immediately. He shook his hand and said, don't take it back. Anything touched by the hand that touched the trash becomes trash too. Wearing it would be an eyesore. Only then did Lucas belatedly feel heartache. Looking at the crumpled coat in the trash can, his heart ached. Previously, Leo disliked his dressing style, so he spent a lot of money to buy several sets of clothes. The clothes he was wearing on this trip to City N were newly bought, but now they were casually thrown away by Leo. It's the feeling of heartache. Lucas figured out that Leo had an episode of his misophobia and didn't like things that Benjamin had touched. After all, Leo had stood up for him, so Lucas didn't want to say much. He could only silently swallow his grievances and force himself not to look at the coat that he had only worn a few times. What are you standing there for? Let's go, Leo said. Yes, Mr. Leo. Lucas looked up. He didn't know where they were going anyway, so he just followed. The two walked towards the lounge one after another. Although Leo didn't stay at the hotel arranged by the conference organizing committee, he had his own lounge at the venue. After lunch, he should have gone to take a nap, but somehow he appeared in front of Lucas. Leo walked ahead in his overcoat with brisk steps. He was already tall and the hem of his overcoat swayed with his steps. If there were a few white doves flying beside him, he would look just like a boss in an old-fashioned gangster movie. Lucas, on the other hand, was left with only a shirt and followed Leo closely. Even though there was central air conditioning in the venue, it was still a bit cold in the corridor. Lucas didn't dare to hunch his body. He straightened his back with cold hands and feet. As they were walking, Leo suddenly stopped and turned to look at Lucas. Lucas quickly asked, "What's wrong, Mr. Leo?" Leo said, "You're afraid of the cold." It was a statement. No wonder he insisted on getting him to blow dry his hair yesterday. It turned out it was his own experience, thinking that everyone would feel cold with wet hair. Lucas didn't dare to admit that he was afraid of the cold and just said, "I didn't wear enough today." He should have worn an extra knitted sweater inside if he had known he would lose his coat. Leo squinted at his pale lips. Lucas felt a tingling sensation on his scalp. Then he heard Leo suddenly say, "You've ruined 2 sets of my clothes already." Before Lucas understood what he meant, the black overcoat fell from above onto his shoulders like a great rock spreading its wings, bringing a warm heat. Lucas looked up in surprise. He already had fair skin and very delicate features. Now, with the large-sized clothes covering him and the straight collar around his chin, his face looked even smaller when he stared upwards with wide, open eyes. "Sheen, Mr. Leo, this isn't appropriate." Lucas panicked and tried to take off the overcoat. Leo stopped him, saying, "You've already touched it. Do you think I'll still want it?" Leo had this ability. Even though he did a good deed, he always managed to make people uncomfortable. Lucas obediently put on the overcoat and said, "Thank you, Mr. Leo." The thick clothes carried the warm body temperature, and a fresh masculine fragrance seeped out from the fabric. Lucas knew it was Leo's usual scent, yet he still couldn't help blushing slightly. Leo was still wearing a suit inside. He straightened his tie, hooked his finger at Lucas, and said, "Follow me." Wearing the ill-fitting overcoat, Lucas continued to follow behind Leo like a junior. In the afternoon, Lucas kept wearing Leo's clothes. When his colleagues saw him, they showed expressions of surprise and confusion. Lucas simply explained openly, "I soiled my coat at noon. Mr. Leo lent me his clothes." Regardless of what others were thinking in their hearts, on the surface everyone seemed to understand. Although it was said to be a loan, Lucas knew that this overcoat was now in his hands. In Leo's eyes, it was as good as being discarded. The entire conference lasted for 2.5 days. The last half day was for an institutional visit. In fact, Leo only planned to attend the first day, leaving the remaining agenda for 2 assistants to follow up. After the first day's itinerary ended, Leo indeed grabbed Lucas and forced him to summarize the content, extract the key points of the meeting, and pressured him to compile a report. The warmth brought by the overcoat had completely faded away. Lucas, who had only slept for 2 hours, stared at the materials on the computer, grinding his teeth in anger. A capitalist is indeed a capitalist, always trying every means to extract all surplus value. Lucas was plunged into a work hell and completely forgot about the unpleasantness at noon, leaving Benjamin out of his mind. He didn't know that Benjamin had been asked to leave the venue in the afternoon. The staff of the conference organizing committee found Benjamin and told him that someone had complained about his harassing others and deprived him of his right to speak at the sub-meeting. Benjamin couldn't believe it and said to the staff, "Whoever complained, I'll sue him for slander." The staff said embarrassedly, "If you don't leave, they'll call the police. It won't look good when the police come." Benjamin's face changed. Just imagining the scene of the police coming into the venue to arrest him made him break out in a cold sweat. Judging from the staff's expression, the person who reported him was probably of high status and he couldn't afford to offend. After much weighing, Benjamin could only swallow his anger and leave the venue. He suspected again that Lucas was behind this, but he also knew that Lucas didn't have the ability to influence the conference organizing committee. Suddenly, the cold face of the man appeared in Benjamin's mind. He was startled. Could it be that Mr. Leo? He couldn't figure out why Mr. Leo would come forward to help Lucas. As the boss of a company, he shouldn't meddle in an employee's private affairs. Could their relationship be more than just that of a boss and a secretary? Although Leo didn't plan to attend the subsequent meetings, it didn't mean he had nothing to do in City N. Shearway has an office in City N, mainly consisting of a sales department and an after-sales department. Leo visited the office for a day to encourage his own employees. Shearway's power battery has a high market share, ranking first in the country and also having a certain influence internationally. However, it's still not enough. Leo hopes that Shearway can occupy more market share. City N is in the north, where several large automobile companies are located. The office in City N is of great strategic significance. Leo further understood the situation and personally guided the work of several departments. Lucas followed Leo all the way. Having gotten used to Leo's nitpicking, he didn't cause any major problems along the way. After inspecting the office, Lucas originally thought that the official business would come to an end. However, Leo arranged a video conference at the hotel, summoning the company's deputy general managers and several senior assistants for discussions. At each meeting, Lucas mainly arranged the venue and notified the participants. He wasn't involved in the recording and summarizing during the meeting. Since they were short-handed during this business trip, Lucas acted as a clerk. At the beginning of the meeting, Leo talked about the situation he saw in City N and urged everyone to arrange the work tasks for the next stage. Thanks to the high-pressure work in the past few days, Lucas could understand and keep up with the meeting content. Only then did Lucas realize that he had made great progress in just a few days. He took the opportunity to steal a glance at Leo. He had to admit that the president's cramming-style pressure had quite an effect. Leo finished talking about the matters in City N in a very short time. Just as Lucas was thinking that the meeting was unexpectedly short, he heard Leo say, "There is also a discovery during this trip to City N." He paused for a moment and then said, "Shirexin has reduced its distribution scale in City N." As soon as these words were spoken, everyone fell silent. Lucas didn't know why Shirexin was mentioned at this time. A few days ago, Carter tried to talk to Leo, but Leo ignored him. Someone spoke up in the video, "Is Shirexin just giving up completely?" Leo said, "This only shows that Shirexin's problems are more serious than what is shown on the books." The others continued to remain silent. In recent years, Shirexin has been imitating others in making power banks, but there has been no breakthrough in function and the design is outdated. It has lost a lot of money. There has also been no progress in its old line business of dry batteries and the market has been shrinking steadily. So, why should we care about Shirexin? A straightforward assistant asked the question that was in Lucas's mind. Lucas originally thought that Leo didn't want to talk to Carter, but unexpectedly he specifically brought it up today. Looking at his subordinates, Leo said, "When a person is drowning, their instinct is to struggle and their first reaction is to grab the nearest person. The one closest to Shirexin is Shearway." The others understood and said, "We can shake off Carter's arm when he tries to pull someone. He is being overly whimsical and actually wants to drag us into making mobile phones together." Everyone laughed at the same time. However, Leo didn't laugh. He just said, "Even if you don't want to get involved, the group will force you to. Moreover, Carter is not a fool. He will definitely take action to save himself. In short, keep a close eye on Carter's movements at all times." Only after Leo made further arrangements did the meeting come to an end. Fortunately, after the meeting, Leo didn't continue to put pressure on Lucas and went back to his room to do God knows what. Lucas sat at the hotel desk organizing the meeting minutes. A colleague in the same room invited him to go to the hotel bar to have fun, but Lucas declined. He stayed alone in the room, enjoying a moment of tranquility. After finishing organizing the minutes, Lucas took out a can of sparkling water from the fridge, leaned against the headboard, and leisurely sipped it while scrolling through his phone. The cool sparkling water slid down his throat, refreshing and stimulating. It was a rare moment of relaxation during the business trip, and Lucas was in a good mood. He was flipping through his WeChat moments, just casually skimming without really thinking, when suddenly a post caught his attention. Elizabeth, my friend went to City Inn. I really want to go there too, but I have to work. So emo. There was a screenshot below. In the screenshot, Thomas and Benjamin were standing together in front of the high-speed railway station in City Inn. The two of them were posing with a peace sign at the camera. There were also words above the photo that said, "I'm here in City Inn. Thanks, darling, for coming to pick me up." That is to say, Elizabeth specifically took a screenshot of Thomas's WeChat moment and reposted it using her own account. Is it really necessary to be so roundabout? It's like a Russian nesting doll situation. Lucas reasonably suspected that Elizabeth probably set this WeChat moment to be visible only to him.